Yep, in the back. I do consider it a forced marriage. There really was no such thing as free choice in Cambodia during that time. All of your actions were motivated by a fear a fear of death and an effort to preserve your life. So any point of compliance that was not obeyed was an opportunity for them to kill you. And certainly people did die because they refused to go along with forced marriages during that time. I think the fact that, these are the circumstances that brought my parents together really affected the context of their relationship. And it's something that I never understood until I found out this fact as an adult. I always wondered, why my two parents were together, even though there was no kind of they had nothing in common, and my mother and my father's relationship was not one that I would characterize as like tender, and it just wasn't the same, and it was really different. I think it greatly affected our family in ways that I probably don't even know, in terms of our perceptions of what a marriage looks like, but also, the kind of commitment that you put forth in order to keep a family together. They laid down an extraordinary example for us. I find that it does have a profound effect, especially in those cases where it's children interviewing their parents. This is often the first time for members of the young generation to really get a chance to understand fully what happened to their parents, and it's their parents' history, but also their history as well. And the level of interest and engagement that people have in their history goes way up, after they do the interview. Also, I think their compassion for their parents goes way up as well. For the survivors, I know that for some of them, it's the first time they're really being acknowledged for their contribution, for their the work that they put, to bring their family to America, their courage for having the will to survive through this whole ordeal. It's wonderful to be able to give them that space of acknowledgement. Actually, there was an article in the New York Times just 2 days ago with a headline, something like, for the younger generation, they don't understand the Khmer Rouge, or some of them don't believe. So it's a real phenomenon in Cambodia. A lot less in America with Cambodian refugees, because at least, some of them may have gotten some reinforcement from their schools or from others. There's just more of an openness about talking about this history here in the U.S. that we enjoy. In Cambodia itself, it's a real problem, and it's because the schools don't really teach about this part of history, even though it was just 30 years ago. And the government itself has an interest in managing this history, and that's why, for instance, the tribunal to prosecute the Khmer Rouge just started this year, 34 years after the fall of the Khmer Rouge itself. What various NGOs have been doing in Cambodia to raise the level of education and awareness among the young generation is to create films, to also bring the young people to the genocide sites, like, there's a main museum there on the site of one of the prison camps where 17,000 people were killed, and other mass grave sites, to just, show them the evidence that this did happen, and it happened on a really large scale. I also hope that my film will play a part in that education as well. We created a Cambodian language version of the film by bringing in actors to dub all the voices. And that version of the film is going to Cambodia this summer. And my hope is to get it on national television there in Cambodia and to distribute it through community screenings through various NGOs in order to, in order to show the narrative or a story of a younger person like me learning about this history. Yes. Yeah. I think there's more than one thing going on there. There are personal reasons because people don't want to have to relive that trauma. They're afraid of re-traumatizing their children or whoever hears their story. There's also a political reason in that, the Cambodian government has set this tone that it's not useful to think about the past and it's potentially dangerous, essentially. And because people have been so inculcated with fear by virtue of living under this totalitarian regime for 4 years, they kind of carry that paranoia with them. I encounter Cambodians every day who say, I really support what you're doing, but I don't want to contribute because I'm afraid that this testimony will somehow be used against me. So you can see how that thinking, is a vestige of having survived the Khmer Rouge itself. I don't blame my mom for having kept it from us for so long, and I understand why she did it. But I do think that she didn't trust us, to have this information and what we would do with it. And there were a lot of tensions and stresses around our family that a lot of families of refugees grow up with that I couldn't quite pinpoint, and I couldn't see the origin of it until I understood the story. So there are a lot of side effects, to the trauma, and the echoes of the trauma continue, even though, the second generation may not even quite understand what happened. Yes? I don't know. There's been a lot of development that's been going on in the two major cities in Cambodia. So there's a lot of foreign investment happening in Cambodia now. And like 3 years ago, there was a 3-story mall put up, and it was like the biggest building in town. And now there are like 60-story high-rises going up. And in a very short period of time, it's really being built up. However, we've had the same government, the same prime minister in power since '92. Well, actually even before that, but officially. And he's a young man, and he will likely try to stay, in power for the rest of his life. And I don't know how Cambodia can become a more liberal democratic society without first having a government that supports free speech and political rights, and there is some competition with other political parties. So the growth of Cambodia and the growth of its development is really being stunted by this strong man who's the current prime minister.